Thank you, everyone, very much for joining us today's webinar, A Conversation with WTMD. Before I hand it over to Ardys Russakis, who will be facilitating today's discussion, I just wanted to share a few housekeeping items. All attendees' videos will be off and audio will be muted. Feel free, though, we want this to still be a discussion, to enter any questions throughout the discussion in the Q&A section. We'll get to them at the end of the presentation. Additionally, the chat function is enabled, so if you'd like to share anything with the panelists or with all attendees, feel free to enter it there. And lastly, we will be incorporating a PowerPoint presentation in today's discussion, which contains quite a few helpful links. We'll be sending that out to all attendees afterwards, so you can access them then. With that, I will hand it over to Ardys.
Thanks, Kathleen. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for spending your time with us today. This is our third webinar in an ongoing series of conversations we're having with our partners. And today, as Kathleen introduced, we're going to be talking with WTMD, Towson University's listener-supported radio station. With me from WTMD is Kirsten Scofield, Director of Finance and Administration, Kristen Laporte, Director of Membership, and Sam Sesa, Baltimore Music and Community Outreach Manager. And they're going to discuss some of the strategies being taken at WTMD during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so to start, I'm going to give a little bit of background on each of them. So Kirsten Scofield, Director of Finance and Administration, she studied at George Washington University and Towson University, earning a BA in art history. Kirsten spent 20 years working in live music industry at the 930 Club in Washington, D.C., and Merriweather Post Pavilion in Columbia, Maryland. This was before she landed at WTMD. She's delighted to be working for a non-profit radio station in her community and helping to make the music happen. She resides in Towson with her husband, Tim, and two daughters, Emily and Molly. Kristen Laporte, Director of Membership, grew up in Maryland and went to college in Colorado. She worked as a marketing coordinator for Vail Resorts before moving back to Maryland in 2008, when she started as WTMD's member coordinator. She's been at WTMD for over 12 years, with 7 years in her current role overseeing WTMD's development team, grant writing, and marketing efforts. She met her husband at WTMD, who is a TU grad, and he also works in the music and art scene in Maryland. And Sam Sesa is WTMD's Baltimore Music and Community Outreach Manager. He hosts the Maryland-centric radio show Baltimore's Hit Parade and helps produce WTMD's live events. Before joining WTMD, Before joining WTMD full-time, he spent almost 10 years as a reporter and editor in the Baltimore Sun Features Department. So I'm going to get started by sharing a statement from WTMD's Facebook page. And for me, this really describes the breadth and depth of WTMD's community engagement and connection to Baltimore. From our home at Towson University, WTMD is Baltimore's award-winning music discovery station, with film screenings, art exhibits, live music performances, outdoor festivals, and the most adventurous music programming on the dial. WTMD has become a catalyst in Baltimore's music and art scene. All of this made possible by community support from our listeners and underwriters. So when I think about WTMD, what has always stood out to me is the approach the station has taken on programming and how it's connected to the local community. So that's the Baltimore region, right? That's the target audience. And the music that WTMD plays focuses on local artists. And it's clear that the station values the craft of songwriting. Much of this music that the station airs is not what you're going to hear on mainstream media outlets. The station authentically listens to and involves the listeners. And WTMD is known for being community focused. It's the way that people participate, or that's the way that all people can, it provides a way that all people can participate, right? So it has highly engaging programs that bring diverse audiences together, whole families together, and it introduces new artists to their new fans. And so I just quickly want to also note that WTMD's local community, it includes our local independent businesses, which is so important. And these are the underwriters, these are the event sponsors, these are the vendors. And I think their website really frames it well. They talk about community focus as enhancing the quality of enhancing the quality of the life in Baltimore. And I really think that that's what WTMD has done over the years. And so here we are today with a very different landscape in front of us, dealing with the current challenges due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And, like so many nonprofits and small businesses, WTMD has been forced to respond and adapt with new innovative programming and operational decisions. And while much of WTMD's response has been seen by this external audience of supporters, I'm sure that there are aspects of the effects of this pandemic that WTMD there are aspects of the pandemic that is happening to WTMD and to the music industry that others may not really understand or know the gravity of it. And so that's where this conversation is going to start today with Kirsten. She is first up, and she has some slides that lay out the foundational effects of COVID-19 and how it's affecting WTMD.
Good morning. So back in March, way back then, WTMD was halfway through our spring membership drive, one of our biggest annual fundraisers, when the gravity of the COVID-19 pandemic began to sink in. So on Thursday, March 12th, we made the difficult decision to end or suspend our spring membership drive. Next slide, please. WTMD is a 501c3 member-supported nonprofit. Our main funding sources are from membership donations, underwriting sponsorships, events revenue, and grants. We rely greatly on the dollars raised from this fund drive to meet our annual budget. However, we knew that this was the right decision to make given the unprecedented circumstances. And we'd heard from numerous listeners and underwriters who appreciated this and supported the decision we made. By mid-March, we're already beginning to see our underwriting clients, who are primarily the local small businesses, especially bars, restaurants, and nightclubs, cancel their current underwriting contracts. The spring is when we sign up many of our sponsors for the First Thursday Festival series that runs May through September. The fourth fiscal quarter, where we are currently, is typically the largest revenue generating quarter for the underwriting. And almost overnight, we watched our underwriting income slow to a trickle. With the canceling of the underwriting contracts and the upcoming events, WTMD faced a potential loss of well over 60% of our fourth quarter earnings. These losses would mean extreme shortfalls for WTMD's budget. There's my daughter. Let's see. Even though WTMD is an essential organization and can continue to operate during the pandemic, our general manager, program director, Scott Mullins, moved fast to transition the staff into working from home as much as possible. Radio stations are tricky places to be socially distanced. Microphones are often shared and not easy to disinfect. Air studios are typically soundproof rooms with little ventilation. But WTMD met the challenges with a variety of new policies. Our morning show host, Alex Courtwright, is now able to do his entire shift from his home studio. Our midday and evening show DJs each have their own studios at the WTMD offices. Everyone else is mandated to work from home with the exception of a handful of part-time DJs who typically record their shifts and shows at times when no one else is in the building. All of the air staff has their own microphone sleeves and headphones and disinfects the air studios after they leave. One of our most publicly painful effects of COVID-19 has forced us to cancel or postpone some of our highest profile live events. Our May and June First Thursdays festivals, which typically bring in more than 10,000 people to Cannon Waterfront Park in downtown Baltimore. Both had to be canceled. Our Saturday morning tunes concerts for April, May, and June, and our Brews and Band showcase also had to be canceled or postponed. First Thursdays are free, but the others are some of our largest ticketed events and represent a significant portion of the annual events budget. Through it all, WTMD has been able to pivot and essentially rebrand the entire station in the past several weeks, but more on that later. COVID-19 has affected all businesses, but especially nonprofits. It's been devastating on Maryland nonprofits, especially in the arts and music community. Institutions like the Creative Alliance, the Gordon Center, and Maryland Hall have been forced to close their doors and cancel their events. And some of them have even had to lay off staff. Fiscal bottom lines are being redrawn, and many of them are appealing. And many of the nonprofits are appealing to their members, the government, and community at large for help. These are dark times for many arts and culture nonprofits. And many nonprofits just have cash to make it through the next month, let alone not be able to make it for 6 months. So this really is significant for nonprofits. And then in the music industry, we should note that the subject of dark times extends to musicians both in Baltimore and nationally, and is the venues that they play. Ever since Napster sent the music industry into free fall in the early 2000s, many Maryland musicians rely on live concerts, song placements, and selling merchandise to make their income. And COVID-19 has shut down almost all of it for them. The same goes for clubs. With no more than 10 people allowed to gather in a place, it's impossible for venues to host socially distant live concerts. And many concerts venue didn't have large cash reserve funds to draw from to begin with. Already we're hearing from some clubs and restaurants with live music that they may not reopen once the pandemic subsides. There's immediate need to help support these venues, and most importantly, the thousands of musicians who make a living performing in them, as well as the staff of those clubs. Sam Sessa is going to talk about the station's response, and much of it was done through the management team of Kristen, Sam, Andy Grimshaw, and led by our general manager and program director, Scott Mullins. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Kirsten. So just to put this in context, so on March 12th, about 8 weeks ago, the station was in the middle of a spring membership drive. They're getting ready to open up the 2020 live event season, which would have kicked off for First Thursday tomorrow. And both represent a substantial portion of WTMD's annual funding support, as you mentioned. So in the course of basically 8 weeks, the WTMD team has not only created and implemented new programming, but as you said, you've rebranded the station. So Sam, can you tell us about what you're doing and how all this happened so quickly?
Sure. So since this whole pandemic began, we've kept our listeners and the community at the forefront of every programming decision that we've made. And I say we, I speak for the management team, all the employees at the station, and Scott Mullins, our general manager. So we know that our listeners come to us for music, but also some information via our news headlines. And so we kind of need to strike a balance of providing both the escape of music, but the need to keep on this ever-changing pandemic that we're all living through. So we believe that we've kind of hit that balance of music and news by changing the overall delivery and the tonality of the station. And I'm going to go through some of the programming initiatives that we've launched. We've launched a ton of new programming here in the last several weeks. They've drawn our listeners closer and created what we refer to now as our radio oasis. It's a term that's kind of resonated with our listeners, and it makes our role a little bit more clear in these crazy times. We've been able to create new programming elements, new features, online concerts, and in essence, we've said this a couple of times, but it's true. We have rebranded the entire station without missing a beat. So we immediately increased the frequency of NPR news headlines. They were coming at the top of each hour a couple times or several times a day. Now they're every hour from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's just a few minutes of it, but it's enough to kind of get the picture of what's going on in the world and then get back into the music, which is why most of our listeners come for the first place. We've also reprogrammed our HD2 channel. It used to be all Baltimore music 24/7. And we wanted to do something for parents with kids who were stuck at home and out of school. So we programmed the mornings from 6 a.m. to noon with rebroadcasts of our popular family show, Young at Heart with Lisa Matthews. And we've heard a lot of great feedback from that decision. And from noon until midnight, we programmed editions of our popular Weasel's Wild Weekend show with this kind of a legendary radio host, Jonathan Weasel Gilbert. And he's celebrating 50 years on air here in the market and also 10 years at WTMD. So this runs 7 days a week on our HD2 channel, and the response has been really positive. Lots of listeners telling us that they listen all day, they keep it on, and in the morning, Young at Heart's been a real gift for them and their kids. Because, it's not a screen, it's something that they can kind of just enjoy together as a family. And other stations in our industry, like WFUV in New York City, they've shared our Young at Heart Marathon in their newsletter and with their listeners and encouraged their own listeners to stream it, which is really encouraging for us. We also created a new feature called a sound prescription. Can you get the next slide? And with the sound prescription, listeners can submit songs they like and they turn to for comfort in times of stress, like songs they love, they want to share. So 3 times a day, once during each of our main air shifts, we play a 3-song set from one listener and it's going to send it out as our sound prescription to help with the stress relief, cabin fever, etc. And there's another feature as well called Homeschool. And every weekday in the 10 o'clock hour, our midday host, Sam Gallant, calls class into session. And as Professor Sam, he sets up a set of music about topics like math, geography, science, biology, that kind of stuff. And so, for example, science was a recent topic, and he did The Sound of Science from the Beastie Boys, Show Me How This Thing Works by Cracker, and from Josh Ritter, he played Stuck on You. So kind of plays off the idea of schools being closed and allows for some kind of out-of-the-ordinary song sets that we wouldn't normally get to. We also have, since we are just heartbreakingly no longer allowed to host live events, which is one of our core tenets of WTMD, so we turn to our archives from previous live performances. We created this new series called From the Vault and Live Lunch Rewind on Fridays as well. Kind of reminds listeners of the role that live performances play at WTMD. And it's kind of comforting. It lets listeners reflect on all the times that we've had them in, or they've been able to tune in and listen to live music. And we're going to do it again in the days to come. So we're pulling from Live Lunch, our evening shows, and in-studio artist visits that we've had over the years, like here on the screen, Adele, Chrissy Hine, Courtney Barnett, those kind of folks. And these air at various times throughout the day. We also launched this new online series called Cabin Fever Concerts. It's kind of our way to extend our support of Baltimore musicians who've taken these huge hits to their income with no public performances. They're all canceled for the near future. So each of these Cabin Fever concerts is a live performance from the home of the musician, and they give us a look inside their living rooms. We get them to tape these short selfie videos. They last about a minute or two and kind of say what's in your refrigerator? What are you drinking? What are you eating? What are you doing to get through this? And they've been really funny. It kind of humanizes this. And also it's a cool look into their world that we wouldn't normally get. And we give the artists PayPal and Venmo information so that the listeners and the viewers can help give them some support. And it's presented on Facebook with social media promotion on Twitter, Instagram, and on air, of course, as well. And since the next few months of our Saturday Morning Tunes family concert series, which is our biggest series of ticketed events, it had to be canceled. So we launched Saturday Morning Tunes live streams with really popular national children's and family musicians. We launched our first one on April 18th, and it's going to be continuing every Saturday starting May 16th. We're featuring one of the upcoming this guy who just won the Grammy Award for Best Children's Album. We've got this bilingual star, Sonia de los Santos. Folks who've played Saturday Morning Tunes shows for us here at the station. They're going to be doing it online for us going forward, which will be exciting. We've also loosened up the request line just to kind of generate more of like a two-way communication line with our listeners. So the air staff takes requests, reads listener comments, and it's helped create kind of this more intimate atmosphere and more of a sense of community because we are a public radio station. So that's part of our mission. We also increased WTMD's sort of social media engagement in some new and creative ways. So we can't connect with our audience in person at live events. We ramped up our presence on social media, post a lot more, have a lot more dialogues with listeners and fans on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well. And we're generating and posting videos on social media more than ever. I'm going to take over the screen for a second here so I can show you one of these videos that we've been producing, this new series called What Would WTMD Stand For Without You?
Welcome to Witness the Master's Dojo with me, the Master. In these uncertain times, we need to know how to protect ourselves. You first! You're next! Both at once! And now, bring me the tome of sacred knowledge so that I may split it with my skull. Here we go. Tuesday nights at 9 and Sunday afternoons at 4.
The goal with these is to hopefully give people a chuckle in these crazy times, remind us that we're all in this together, and also that, WTMD, we are a public radio station, and, we are what we are because of the public and listener support. And so all of these changes, they've already been generating some positive results, and more people are staying at home, which means so there's fewer people in their cars, which means less traditional radio listeners. We don't really have great ways of tracking how many people are listening to the terrestrial radio just at any given moment. But we can follow the number of online streams, and they are the highest they've ever been in the history of the station. So that said, it's all really exciting coming from a programming standpoint. It's just been a lot of great new content, and we've gotten a lot of great response from it.
Thanks, Sam. So, Kristen, even with all this amazing new programming and rebranding of WTMD, fundraising and underwriting are still crucial and needed to keep the station running. My understanding is that though your March fund drive was canceled, WTMD had to revisit new strategies to move forward with fundraising and building new partnerships. What are some of what are you doing? And what you're getting ready to share, I think really showcases what TMD's commitment to Baltimore arts community really looks like.
Hi, yeah. So as my colleague said a little earlier, the first thing that happened, we were literally on the air pitching, asking for money. And on, I guess it was March 12th, there was I think a press conference the night before, which really kind of sunk in how devastating things were going to become. So we made the decision that morning to cancel that fund drive. And we quickly kind of got together, and the management team and the entire staff to figure out what we could do to really speak to our listeners. And in my mind, I was coming from a place where what are we going to do now that's going to compel our listeners to give and want to be with us? And one of the first things I did was I just really thought, we send an email out, an e-blast out every Thursday or Friday. It's like our standard newsletter, and it has business in it. We're usually asking for a donation. We're putting some programming stuff in there. We have underwriting sponsors in there. And I was like, I want to send out something that's really sweet and nice at the beginning of the week that isn't a business email. It's just good news, resources. So we started this Mindful Mondays newsletter. And that's been a lot of fun. Later, you can click on those to check those out. But it's no business. It's just some really nice stuff from the staff. And like a nice touch point to start the week. But obviously, that was it was fun and a nice thing to do. But the main focus was, how are we going to raise money in this time? And you can go to the next slide, I think. So fundraising in this era has been kind of a balancing act. Yes, we're a nonprofit small business and we are struggling and suffering, but so are all of our listeners. Every person that's listening is having some kind of struggle. Most likely all are having something financial going on. And so it was really a balance, but it became apparent that we need to go back on the air and ask our listeners for support. So, and again, we didn't come to that decision lightly. And I really only felt comfortable doing that if we were able to support somebody else. Our listeners, it's very important to our listeners to, over the years, we've added in some things where if you make a donation, part of it's going to go to something else in some way, shape, or form. So most people probably don't know this, but public radio stations by FCC rules are not allowed to fundraise for another nonprofit. You can't go on the air and say, when you make a donation for this whole drive, we're going to donate $50,000 to this nonprofit. You can't do that. So a way to get around that is we were able to work with our FCC attorney. So for that period of time, we were able to donate 10% of every donation to an organization that we chose. It took a couple weeks to find one, but we partnered with the Baltimore Artist Emergency Relief Fund, which was a coalition created by BOPA, along with some other seed funders. And it was just a really great way to go back on the air and say, your money's supporting WTMD, number one, but part of your donation is going to go to the artists who take care of us. Like one of the slogans in it was, take care of the people who take care of us. And it was a very pared down fund drive with one jock on the air. We usually pitch with two people in the air studio, and it's very exciting and chaotic. And it was just pared down, a nice soft drive, no thank you gifts. We was successful financially, which was great. But I think that the best part was the comments that we received from our listeners, which were incredible, like this one here. I've never seen so many just uplifting and kind of made me personally and the entire staff feel good about having to do that, having to go and ask for money. So it was a really great experience. And we all, basically we made back the money that we lost in canceling the drive. So it was successful there. Again, but the positive feedback was amazing. You can go to next slide. So underwriting we essentially have three revenue streams, which are membership, underwriting, and events. And so events and underwriting have pretty much been wiped out right now. And we needed to figure out what to do quickly for our underwriting clients to make sure, create a space for a goodwill and keep them in the spotlight. So we immediately started giving them low cost or free announcements for longtime clients, local clients. We added sponsors to these incredible features that we'd started. So perfect example here, it's full circle to see creatively, we come up with Cabin Fever Concerts, which was the programming part that was the first element. The name, we're big about names, coming up with the best name usually then helps us figure out the programming. And then we can find a sponsor for it. And we had some great sponsors come through for that. So adding those to Cabin Fever Concerts and we've been putting them in our newsletter. We have a link on our website where you can see what any of our clients who are telling us what they're doing. We immediately said what all of the restaurants that we work with were doing, whether they're doing curbside or, everything that they're doing. So I think we've done a really good job at that, and we've heard some great feedback about that as well. And then all of that led to some partnerships. So again, they donated the 10%. It was a partnership with that coalition that was created by BOPA, and we were able to send them a check and receive a nice thank you letter and know that we are part of seeding that fund for these Baltimore musicians. They're giving out essentially they're giving out micro grants to anyone who applies that meets the requirements, which is great. Sponsorships for Cabin Fever concerts. That led to some, it also has a bigger platform there for our artists on Cabin Fever concerts, so they can put their virtual tip jars up, and it's a really great way to support our community. Another great thing we recently did was, I'm sure you're familiar with Charm City Bluegrass Festival. They had to cancel their festival in April, and they came up quickly with this great DigiFest. It was actually at the Gordon Center, and Sam hosted the segments, and we streamed it on Facebook. And another great way, it was really a learning experience, I think, for everyone involved. Anyone in the music community who saw it probably learned a lot from it, and how to do those things with scrolling across the bottom and really like coming together to figure out how everybody can be supported. The Gordon Center, WTMD, Charm City Bluegrass, the artists. So that was a really, really great experience. And I know that we learned a lot from that, and hope that it helps us with future experiences like that. You can go to the next slide. So what is the outcome, or what is to come for us and nonprofits and live music in general? No one has a crystal ball, but the early forecasts for the live music industry, sadly, are pretty bleak. You hear news stories every day. My husband, every day, I hear him saying, summer's canceled, because some tour he's just read about has been canceled, or something's been canceled. So, we've spoken with several Baltimore club owners, and the earliest anyone seems to be booking new shows is November, but they pretty much think that things will be canceled or postponed through the end of the year. Others are holding on to shows they've announced in September, but canceling summer shows just to kind of hope, with some hope there. But even if they're allowed to proceed without a vaccine, will people actually be rushing back? That's the big question. Like, maybe everything will be eased up, but are people actually going to come to see it? Probably not, is the thought. And traditionally, small clubs generate revenue based on bar sales, not ticket sales. So it's, they've lost all of that right now. So we do think it will continue to be rough times for the live music industry, including our events line. But we have a different voice than that. We have a voice that a lot of people don't have. So I think there's big hope for us. Yes, we do a lot with live events, but we've discovered all these other ways to reach our audiences. So we're really excited about that.
As we're getting ready to wrap up the conversation, there's going to be some final thoughts that Kirsten and Sam are also going to share. But I want to just let everybody know that we are going to be opening up for Q&A in the next few minutes. So start thinking about your questions.
So I wanted to talk for a minute about just how in the history of WTMD, 15, 16 years ago, we started out as a radio station, and then we became a radio station that produces events. And, that went on and kind of grew over the last 10 years or so and has really blossomed. And because of this, we've had to pivot again and essentially become a radio station that also produces television for the internet. And so, for example, we've been producing our First Thursday Festival series in Mount Vernon and Canton Waterfront Park for about 15 years. And we've had more than 200 bands play. It's become the biggest outdoor concert series in the city, if not the region. And as you heard, we had to cancel May, and we're going to have to cancel June as well. So in place of that, in place of our May First Thursday Festival, we're doing an all-day First Thursday radio marathon. That's going to be tomorrow, Thursday, May 7th. We're going to be playing music from most of the 200 some bands who played First Thursdays and talking about some of our favorite performances over the years. And, we haven't officially announced it, but we are going to be canceling our June First Thursday Festival. And we're planning in its place a virtual First Thursday festival on Facebook featuring performances from a bunch of national bands as well as Baltimore bands, some that have played First Thursday, some that haven't yet. But we're going to be working with a local video production company to help put this together. And our goal is to make it kind of the virtual equivalent of what First Thursdays was, which is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, online music event in Baltimore and in the region. So these are just some of the ways we've pivoted to kind of meet the challenges that we've been presented with here. So I'd like to turn it back over to Kirsten next, our Director of Finance.
With the significant loss of revenue, we've taken several steps to help WTMD function financially while trying to avoid layoffs. We've applied for the Maryland Small Business COVID-19 Emergency Relief Grant, the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan Grant, and the Paycheck Protection Program. Unfortunately for us, on April 24th, we were awarded the SBA EID grant, and last Friday we were notified that the PPP loan was being initiated. The PPP loan can be 100% forgiven if used under the criteria that has not been specified yet for the 8 weeks following the receipt of the funds. Receiving these grants will help WTMD meet our budget shortfalls. And in closing, I have to say that I am so overwhelmed by what we've been doing, and we know that we're creating a deep and meaningful connections with our listeners and business supporters and giving them some relief during these stressful and scary times. Kirsten mentioned that we received listener comments, and she sent us an email and said, you know, here's a spreadsheet with some listener comments, and it's a lot. And as I started to scroll through it, and I kept scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and it was almost 1,000 listener comments telling us how much WTMD means to them. And it was amazing. And most of those comments came with a donation to us. We're so proud of the changes and adaptations that we have made and are continuing to make. And with the overwhelming positive feedback and continued financial support from our listeners, we're seeing signs that our hard work is paying off. And we really thank you for giving us a chance to talk today. I'm just so proud of everything that WTMD is doing. And best of luck to everybody, and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. So congratulations on receiving these grants. That's great news. I am just going to go ahead and open it up to some Q&A. But Kathleen actually is going to kind of moderate that and read some of those off. But I'm just curious, one question I had, in moving forward, you know, is WTMD thinking of keeping all of this programming, right? Is there anything, how does it look for WTMD in the future in terms of all these changes that have been put into place? And I know eventually we'll start to hopefully evolve where we have these public events that we can all attend again, but will you keep it all going once we can?
Sure. Yeah, we were actually just talking about this yesterday. You know, we're planning this virtual First Thursday festival, and you know, if it goes well, maybe we'll talk about potentially making that a series. And if that goes well, you know, we could say, well, we don't have First Thursdays during the winter time. You know, maybe if we see a great response from this could be something that continues at least through this winter, if not, you know, past that point. Because are people going to be conditioned now to just expect a lot more live events, a lot more free streaming concerts and things online? And if so, you know, I think we should be there to meet that need. And I feel like this will change the way people absorb media, for sure. This is going to have lasting impacts. It's going to affect the way people attend concerts. And I think we're taking all that into account. And I think that we're going to keep changing our programming to meet the needs of our community and the public. But I don't see why a lot of these programs we've started couldn't keep going even after this crisis has passed.
Okay, we do have a few questions in. So two of the questions are actually pretty similar. How has COVID-19 affected other small, local, community-minded radio stations, both advertiser-supported and non-commercial? And then the other question that's similar is, what are you seeing from other college and independent stations? Are you information sharing with colleges, and are they replicating some of your ideas?
I can answer to a little bit of that. I know that most stations are experiencing the same underwriting issues. It's kind of across the board. While there are stations that are similar to us, we are all very different markets just make us different stations. But we were one of the first. We were in FundDrive when this happened, so we were one of the first people talked to about how we made the decision to cancel the FundDrive. So I ended up doing a webinar with, it's a big group that all public radio stations belong to, and it's kind of like a consultant group that we all kind of share ideas and swap ideas and look to for help. And there's been some kind of forms repositories created where you can go in and gather information and take information from each other. And it's very clear that people need help in navigating through these times, and most are being affected the way that we are. Everyone is applying for the same grants and keeping their fingers crossed, hoping that they're getting them. And it's just different for everybody else. But definitely across the board, the underwriting issue is one of the biggest things for most media. I mean, all media, commercial or non-commercial. So it is affecting them. Small stations in Baltimore, there are a few public radio stations, and I believe that everyone's kind of facing the same thing. But again, we're all so different that you don't know what type of endowments people have and all that kind of stuff and how they're using their programming. So it's definitely an issue for everybody. And everybody's trying to be as creative as we are, for sure. You see, there's just so much going out. It's great.
To continue with the trend of this being an issue for everyone, what are you hearing from local artists about how they are pivoting and trying to sustain themselves?
Cool. I'll take this one. At this point, it's still a lot of big, scary question marks for musicians, because what's happening is everybody's trying to do online shows to raise money that way. Virtual tip jars is what they're being called, Venmo, PayPal, whatever, and they're doing online streams. But the problem is when you do that, you're competing with yourself. You would go on a tour and you would play 20 shows in 20 different cities, and each one you would make a little bit of money from the ticket sales, but you'd make some money from merchandise and, album sales and whatever else you can make that way. You go online and it's anyone who's a fan of yours is already there. And so, it's harder to keep, it's less sustainable of a model, that is. And that's if you're a singer-songwriter, or you're the singer and guitarist or keyboardist of a band. If you're the drummer, if you're the bass player, this is really hard to do, because you can't just put yourself out there as a solo artist and play this band's music. All right, let me give you an example. So there is a singer and songwriter named Chris Jacobs, who is a very popular Baltimore musician and singer in kind of the Americana and jam and roots music scenes here. And he's been going up twice a week and doing one of the more popular live streaming series. And he'll get 250, sometimes 300 people watching at the same time, that's great. These are great numbers for live streams. But he even comes out and says, look, some of these shows are to support my band because they can't do anything right now. And, he can't bring them into the live stream because of the lag times with Zoom and everything else. So, he's been one of the more successful navigators of all this, but even he is struggling with, do I go back online twice a week for the next 50 weeks? Is that what I do? Is that what live music looks like for me now? And, so also musicians are doing merchandise sales that support, certain causes that they like, or that, I know I've seen t-shirt manufacturers who are donating t-shirts to a cause that goes straight to the band or to the promoter or to the club. So people are trying a lot of different things right now, but it's still too early to see what's going to stick other than live streams and donations. And also one last thing, organizations like Bandcamp has been doing events where they waive their fees for the weekend, so that these fees that would normally go to Bandcamp go to the artists instead. Spotify has added a donation button so you can support the artist directly if you want to. Those sorts of platforms are stepping up some, but the impact of this is still a big question mark. And these unknowns are pretty scary for a lot of these musicians.
We do have one final question. It's a little complex. I'm not sure who wants to answer it. Does Sam Sessa really know karate?
No. My kids are taking karate, so I get to practice my moves on them. That was surprisingly satisfying, actually, to have my kids involved and get to karate chop them in that video. Hope you guys enjoyed that.
So we have no more questions?
Nope, that was it.
Okay. So Kirsten, Sam, I just want to say thank you on behalf of Towson University's Division for Strategic Partnerships and Applied Research and the BTU team, and for all that you're doing and the team at WTMD is doing. This is great, and we appreciate having this conversation with you today.
Thanks,
Thank
Ardys.
you. Thank you.
Stay safe.
Everybody else, stay tuned. We'll be offering more webinars in the upcoming weeks. We'll continue to talk about strategies and best practices on how to stay connected to your partners and to the community that you serve. And I thank you all for attending.